Well, I am super excited today to have Warren Redlich on board. And Warren, let's not bury the lead. The stock was up against the market again today. What do you think?
I don't focus on short-term stock price, and honestly, I did not know that until you told me.
Okay.
Um, I I think that we focus too much on short-term stock prices, particularly in the Tesla fan base community, whatever. I think that what's happening with the company is way more important than the stock, both from a personal perspective and from a even from an investor perspective. What happens with the company long term is way more important to me than what happens with the stock price on a daily basis. Um, I
I
think the
know this,
stock is
I know this
massively under. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's $200 a share.
just under
Okay, so at $200 a share, I think the stock is massively undervalued. I think the real value of the stock today is more like $1,000.
today.
So when you think the stock is worth $1,000, if it's trading at 150 or 250, does it really matter?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I knew this about you. I know you don't care about short term. I assumed that you at least kind of look at it and are interested on kind of trends and what's going on.
I look at the stock price when people say, "Hey, did you see what Tesla did today?" And then they ask me like, "What's going on with the stock?" And I'll say this. Let me just make this point. There are a large number of people on the internet and elsewhere who purport to explain short-term stock price movements and sometimes purport to predict short-term stock price movements. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of thinking with me.
Yes.
Imagine you were confident that you were 55% accurate in making short-term stock price predictions. Just 55%.
Yes.
How long would it take you to become a trillionaire?
It wouldn't take long at all.
Okay. So my view is that no one can predict short-term stock prices with any degree of accuracy significantly above, like maybe 50.01%. Not with so close that you can't know with confidence that you're actually over 50%. Okay. And there's a corollary to this, or there's a conclusion from this, which is if you can genuinely explain something and you genuinely understand something, then you can also predict it. Okay. If you can't predict,
Yeah,
if
right.
your understanding of a topic prevents you from predicting it,
You need to learn more
then
about the topic.
then you
Yes.
don't really understand it as well enough.
Right, right.
And the answer is because no one understands short-term stock price movements. No one can explain short-term stock price movements, and no one can predict them. Every people can offer explanations
Right,
for short-term stock price movements,
right.
but no one really knows, because if anyone actually understood short-term stock price movements, they would be a trillionaire and they wouldn't be wasting their time talking to us.
Okay, so I'll give you an alternative to that. We'll see what you think. So my theory would be that if I understand, like you just said, if I understand Tesla better than the street, even better than other retail investors, if I spend a couple of hours a day studying Tesla and thinking it through, I should have an arbitrage advantage. An arbitrageable, I think would be the right way to say that, advantage over the rest of the people who are dealing in Tesla. I don't have any advantage over somebody who's trading Apple because I'm not spending that kind of time on Apple. But if I'm doing that on Tesla, it should give me an advantage.
Okay. I think if you're closely following Tesla, then I think you have an advantage in investing in Tesla for the long term, because the vast majority of the market is not following Tesla closely.
Mm-hmm.
And so the vast majority of the market does not see what we see.
Mm-hmm.
You can write the books,
Which I
um,
have.
right? You can write the books, but we can't make them read them. And they're getting a lot of other information from a lot of other sources.
Right.
And you know my battery revenue model, napkin math, my Robotaxi napkin math. The math is extremely compelling if you just think out to 2030, let's
Yes.
say.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like inescapable math. But the vast majority of Wall Street looks at, at best this coming quarter and as much last quarter. They aren't looking 6 years out or 4 years out or 2 years out. They're looking for next week. The Gary Black is always talking about catalysts for Q1 or catalysts for 2023. Catalyst is I think Gary is not a bad person, but I think that belief structure that you can identify catalysts is fiction. It's you can believe it if you want to, but it's not reality.
So you're not following my Twitter and seeing my catalysts, huh?
I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't tweet about catalysts, and I don't talk about catalysts on my channel because I don't focus on the short term. I'm actually trying to talk less about the short term and more about the long term. Even when I reviewed the Q4 numbers, it wasn't for, okay, this is what's likely to happen in Q1. I did talk a little bit about what I think it means for 2023, but it's more like, well, what does all this mean for 2026 and 2030?
Right.
I think that's just a much healthier way of thinking about it than like trying to target what's going to happen next week or next month or next year.
Yeah, no, I totally understand you. I have most of my Tesla investment in the stock itself and will probably not ever trade it. Well, ever's a long time. But I do have an amount that I play. It's for play. It's for fun. And I actually used that to make a tremendous amount of money in the run up last time. So by doing leaps, and I know you've done a little bit of trading in the options recently yourself. So there's this place.
Just once.
Yeah, just once. Okay.
Less than 1% of my portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. Play money. Yeah, it's the play money. So in order to do the leaps well, I do need to keep my eyeball on some of the more short-term issues.
Well, I wasn't trying to do it well.
Oh, okay.
I just decided to play a game.
Well, in napkin math with leaps, and I plan to do I'm going to do at least one show on leaps. With leaps, it's almost like your long-term model. If you take a 2.5-year leap, at some point during that 2.5 years, it's likely to be way ahead of the number if you have a high degree of confidence in the stock. So at some point in a long term, it's going to be moving above your entry point.
There's a fundamental problem with Tesla stock from a short-term investor perspective that is not a significant problem from a long-term investor perspective. It is an extremely volatile stock. One of the reasons it's extremely volatile is because I think there's a far greater share of the market that is involved in Tesla that is playing short-term games like leaps and options and margin purchasing.
We know
and shorting.
Yes.
And all of these in any stock, if you have a high share, a high proportion of the stock is shorted and optioned and margin bought and everything else, it inherently makes the stock more volatile. Now, this is Warren's attempt to explain short-term stock price movements. So take that for what it's worth, because I can't predict short-term stock price movements. But when the stock is rising and people are buying on margin and people are playing option games and shorts are getting burned, that puts upward pressure on the stock. So it's rising and it makes the stock rise faster. When the stock is falling, people get margin called, and people with options, like the wrong kind of options, are forced to buy or whatever, or to sell or whatever. There's certain situations that force selling.
Yes.
I don't claim to understand all of this. And so the rises are faster and the falls are steeper. Like the margin selling pressure that we had that brought us down to 100 is gone.
Yes.
Once you start rising, that margin selling pressure goes away. So there was buying and selling pressure, and the selling pressure went away. So the buying pressure comes in. Again, I'm not claiming I can genuinely explain short-term stock price movements, but I think that Tesla is just inherently more volatile. So when you see it going up steeply, it's gonna go up faster, but you never know when you're gonna hit the peak, and you never know when you're gonna have a dip.
Yeah, no question about that. Although really, really close study, maybe you can increase your odds. I could never win the argument that anybody ever consistently beats the odds over time. I was a genius in 2019 and 2020 with leaps, an absolute genius. I think I made 33 times my money in that period. And then I was not so much of a genius last year.
Yeah.
So there you go. So,
and also I would say this, It's not that you were a genius last year and you were not a genius, whatever. It's not that you were a genius in 2019 and you weren't a genius in 2021 or whatever, or 2022. It's that you were lucky when you 33x'd and you were unlucky when it fell.
Well, that's could be true. Could be true.
Well, no, because if you were that smart, if it was genuine intelligence that led to your success, then you would know it, you would have repeated it, and you'd be a trillionaire.
So, Warren, why don't we go into your sweet spot rather than the spot that you hate, which is short term? Let's go into the long term. There's a whole bunch of long term opportunities. I agree with you 100%. It's like you'd have to be brain dead if you spent an hour studying it. If you spent 7 hours reading my book, you would have to be brain dead not to realize that this is the greatest potential upside compared to the downside risk maybe in history, especially at these prices.
I think it takes longer than that to overcome all the negatives that people hear.
Okay. No longer than 7 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you could be right. So now, but for you, looking forward, which one of the mega $1 trillion opportunities intrigues you the most?
Well, intrigues me the most would have to be bot. Tesla bot. Sorry.
Optimus.
I want to say Tesla bot Optimus, but I think the potential for Tesla becoming like just artificial intelligence in general, I haven't really put enough thought into what happens when Tesla takes its lead in real world artificial intelligence and deploys that beyond bot. I have a good sense of what it can do with bot. Taking it beyond Tesla, beyond Optimus, and what else they could do with it. I think the opportunities for that are endless and like almost beyond imagination.
But you
so
have
that intrigues me. But for the ones that I have a grasp of, Tesla Optimus, the bot, intrigues me the most.
So you have a pretty good imagination. What are you imagining as this beyond bot? I mean, that's why I listen to you. I don't know if you've heard that before. I listen to your.
No, I'm literally like I'm. If you're following Chat GPT, if you're following Stable Diffusion, if you see where this is going, it's hard. I literally like. I think. Are you familiar with AlphaGo?
I have not spent any time with AlphaGo.
AlphaGo, there's a documentary on AlphaGo, and basically they used AI to train a computer to play the game Go, and they ultimately beat the world champion.
Right.
There was this moment, I think maybe it was the first or second game between AlphaGo and the world champion, the human world champion. And I think it was move 37. Don't hold me to that. There's a moment where the software made a move that no one saw coming, and like no human would have made. And people freaked. And people are still to this day like trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And so once AI develops its own understanding of the world, it's going to see things we don't see. Mm. It's going to make decisions we wouldn't even think of. So I think science fiction authors have got some pretty creative ideas, but I don't have a handle on where it goes. Like once it's smarter than us, it's kind of hard to predict what it's going to do because it's smarter than us. So I think I would have to step away from that and say, it's so hard to wrap your head around that I don't know where to go with that. Mm-hmm. And it's not just something that benefits shareholders. It probably benefits all of humanity really spectacularly, unless it kills us all, which I think is unlikely. So I think that, probably let's go with bot though, with Optimus. So plain and simple, I see Optimus being a step change in how capital enhances labor productivity. I think there is I disagree with Elon. I disagree with Andrew Yang. I disagree with a lot of other people who think that AI is going to destroy jobs. I mean, it will destroy jobs. Technology always destroys jobs, but technology always creates more jobs than it destroys.
Right.
Creates more and better jobs. It destroys the boring, dangerous, tedious jobs, and it creates much more interesting jobs for humans. So I think that the potential for Tesla bot to be, we go to the moon or Mars, and the average human controls 10 plus bots doing work. Then the bots are out in the harsh environment of no atmosphere or Mars limited atmosphere, and they're doing things that humans either can't do or are very, very difficult for humans to do. So I think from a shareholder perspective, I could see where Tesla is producing 100 million bots a year, and each bot is generating value to its customers over the life of the bot in the ballpark of $500,000 to $1 million. There's, let's say, $50,000 a year for 10 years or $100,000 a year for 10 years. That's the value that the bot generates for the customer that buys it and gets to use it.
Right.
And if Tesla is able to capture just $100,000 a bot times $100 million,
$10,000.
I think that's $10 trillion in revenue. Am I wrong?
It doesn't even matter at those levels. It gets to a point where it's beyond the scope of our normal daily ability to really take it in.
Yeah. Well, and also let's suppose a true value of a bot is $100,000, and I think it might be worth a lot more than that. But let's suppose it's worth $100,000.
Oh, easily.
What's the cost when you're producing 100 million a year? What's the cost to make a bot? It's a lot smaller than a car.
Oh yeah.
The Tesla car is something like a quarter of the cost of a Model 3 or a Model Y is the battery pack.
Yeah.
And the battery pack is like, I don't know, $5,000-$10,000. Well, the bot with an 80 kilowatt hour pack, an 82 kilowatt hour pack, if you're going down to a 2.3 kilowatt hour pack, well, the cost of the pack is about a 40th of the cost of the pack in a Model 3 or a Model Y. Okay. So it weighs 125 pounds instead of 3,500 pounds. So
right.
It's, 1/25th or 1/30th of the mass. So the manufacturing cost should probably be, less than 1/10 the manufacturing cost of a Model 3 or a Model Y. So you're talking less than $5,000 and you're selling it for 100. Right. So it's basically 95+% margins. So you got 10 trillion in revenue and 9.5 trillion of it is profit, gross profit. That's, as an investor, I see that as being pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah. Not bad at all.
I mean, what's Apple's revenue? Is Apple $1 trillion in revenue?
Oh, no. Nobody is. Walmart has the largest revenue, and I think they're around 650 billion. I think Apple's half of that.
Apple's revenue in September 2022 was $90 billion. Is that right?
For the quarter.
That's all?
For the quarter.
So that's $360 billion for a year?
That's what I'm saying. Half of Amazon. I'm not Amazon, half of Walmart. Walmart's the largest revenue company in the world.
Okay. But that's nowhere close to $1 trillion.
Oh, not close.
And we're talking about 10 trillion in revenue. And we're talking about much higher margins. Like, what's the value there? It's off the charts.
It's out of the
so. I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, as an
investor,
I have an advantage over most people that are following Tesla in that I was a plastics manufacturer for 30 years, and I had 100 employees. I could have replaced easily 10 of them with robots that didn't do much more than the robot that came out on the AI day.
Let me just make the case for why I think for people who don't understand the opportunity of Optimus. Let me start with the really simple early use case of the Tesla bot. You own a Burger King or McDonald's and you have 10 employees on a shift. So it's a fairly large Burger King or McDonald's because most of them have less than that. But let's say you have 10 employees on a shift. And the bot isn't able to do everything that any one person does, but it's able to do enough of different tasks, like take the garbage out, mop the floors, simple stuff, that you're able to reduce your staff from 10 to 9 and let the bot do some of the grunt work.
Right.
And let's say your employees cost you, you're paying them $10 an hour, which is now, I think, low for American standards.
Oh, yeah.
But let's say you're paying them $10 an hour and the overall cost to the employer is $15 an hour. Just going with that theory. So, and the bot works each shift, if a bot works one shift, that's 2,000 hours a year.
Mhm.
But the bot probably works 2 shifts. Also could work weekends. It can work 7 days a week,
Could be
whatever.
4
But let's
shifts.
say it works 4,000 hours a year instead of 2,000 hours a year.
Mhm.
So that's $60,000 a year that it saves you in going from 10 employees to 9. And that's when bot is marginally capable.
Right.
That's before bot becomes more capable. That at its sort of like minimum level of competence that you're hoping bot will achieve, where it can mop floors and take the garbage out, and do some other, menial tasks. That's saving the employer $60,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what would the employer pay for that?
At least 60.
If it's going to work for 10 years, right? It's worth $600,000 to the employer. Not to mention that every, month or, twice a month or every 3 months or whatever, you get a software update and the bot gets better.
Yes.
Try that with your human employees.
Well, theoretically, they should be.
Some of them do. Some of them don't. So if you price that out, like what's Burger King willing to pay for that bot?
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's probably $100,000 or more.
Right.
So that's the early stage. Right? That's the early stage. What happens when bot becomes more capable and it's able to do more complicated tasks?
Yeah.
I like my favorite use case for bot is roofing. That if you can, that roofing is a dangerous job.
Right.
And it's boring and it's repetitive.
Right.
If you could train a bot to do roofing work, and by the way, James Dowman disagrees with me. He doesn't see roofing as a particularly good application for bot, but whatever. If you were able to reduce the number of workers who had to go on the roof by 50%, how many lives did you save?
Oh, yeah.
How many serious injuries did you prevent? And how much less does it cost you? Because, the workers, to pay somebody to go up on that roof is expensive. That's a job you got to pay something for. I mean, they don't get paid a lot. They get paid more than a Burger King worker.
Yeah, a lot more.
So you're generating more value. So
yeah, that's why I say I look around that factory that I owned and I could see 10 positions out of 100 that would easily be replaceable. And that might only take 2 bots to replace them because they're faster, more efficient, and they work 4 shifts. So it's like, yeah, it's the numbers are really pretty incredible. And this is why I have this argument that I've made. I don't know if I've made it to you yet, but that it's not going to take that long. That people are saying that it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before there's useful robots. And I'm claiming that I think they'll be building 3D robots this year that they'll be deploying in the plants, in the Tesla facilities, maybe in SpaceX, in order to be able to start gathering data and applying use cases.
I'm torn on that one. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I don't think it matters whether bot becomes useful and productive and commercially valuable in 2028 versus 2025. I think what matters is that it happens at all.
Mm-hmm.
If it happens in 10 years, it's still game-changing for humanity.
Right.
I do think it'll be sooner than 10 years. I do think it's 3 or 4 years from it being able to do significant, meaningful work, and maybe only 2 years. But, I think 3 or 4 years is a safer prediction. And I think that Tesla's going to have to go through a lot of iterations of Optimus to figure out how they want to manufacture at scale. Right there at the prototype stage, and they're moving aggressively, and yeah, I think that. So that's the out there, like, holy shit, this is amazing scenario. And Robotaxi is the one that I've been harping on since 2019. That I think the value creation is, Elon calls it insanely gigantic.
Yes.
The one I'm most excited about on a personal level, by the way, is Cybertruck, but that's not $1 trillion opportunity.
Have you heard? So, on a slight segue here, have you heard anything from Tesla at all that they said that would cause you to think that Cybertruck has been delayed beyond something probably coming off the line early summer?
Well, I don't know about early summer. I think that production starts middle of the year, so Q2 or Q3. I think there will be minimal deliveries in Q3 or Q4.
Okay,
I don't think you're going to see substantial volume until 2024.
That's what they said. Substantial.
And I haven't heard anything to change that. I mean, I think Elon made some comment about manufacturing Cybertrucks going to be hard.
Yeah.
Which is, typical Elon. But, Lars Moravi on the Q4 call seemed pretty confident that things were going well. And I think that Elon tends to get over optimistic about things. And I think Lars and Drew and Zach and the rest of the Tesla team and the SpaceX team tend to be more, when they say something's going to happen, it's a lot more likely to happen when they say it's going to happen than when Elon says something's going to happen. So, Drew Baglino said that the battery day projections were for 2026. So people freaking out that they don't have 400 watt hour per kilogram 4680s produced in high volume this week are missing, what they're trying to do. And they have plans. They're following their plans, and I think Cybertruck's going to happen. I'm hopeful that there's a chance that I will get my Cybertruck before the end of this year, but I think it's more likely 2024.
Do you have a low number?
I ordered in the first hour.
Okay.
I think my number's around 10,000.
All right. Yeah, you could be seeing a Cybertruck this year. That'd be kind of cool.
I am excited about it. I have plans to make a music video. I've talked to I have this idea of a music video I'm going to make with a Cybertruck. It involves country line dancing. If you follow my personal life, I'm into country line dancing now.
I know about your country line dancing. Yes.
So I have an idea for a good. I have the location. I have the people in mind. I've already talked to the cameraman, the producer, the video guy that I have in mind. So, or a video guy I have in mind for it.
So it would seem like with Cybertruck, the real opportunity, if somebody wanted to make money on their Cybertruck, would be you'd be able to Turo, put it on Turo from day one, probably at $300 or $400 a day.
Well, the real opportunity for Cybertruck is going to be in the Robotaxi network. I ordered a second Cybertruck because I believe it's going to be the most valuable Robotaxi. The dollars per mile that you get paid will be higher on a Cybertruck than it will be on a commuter vehicle. The Cybertruck will be doing jobs that are harder. The Cybertruck will eventually, not initially, the Cybertruck will be doing towing jobs. It'll tow your boat. It'll tow a trailer. Cybertruck will go do a Home Depot run, or it will take 6 kids to college and all their stuff in the back. So I think the dollars per mile that you will earn from your Cybertruck are going to be higher than the dollars per mile you'll earn from a Model 3 or a next generation, Generation 3 platform vehicle. And I got my Cybertruck's FSD at $7,000 on the first one and $8,000 on the second one. So I don't personally think Turo is that great. I think it sounds good, but I think ultimately there's more hassles with it. And it's really good if you live near an airport. But it's just like that, Turo means you have to do work, right? You have to do something. Robotaxi means you press the button on your phone app that says, go make me money. And the car just goes off and makes you money.
I had 2 cars on Turo. I had 2 cars on Turo for a couple of years, and it was good, but it did require work and it wasn't fun. All of a sudden you have to drive out and pick somebody up at the airport or whatever. Okay. So I know you have an opinion on this. I'm not sure I agree with you. What is your theory of Investor Day with regard to the Generation 3 platform?
I think they're going to provide us a fair amount of detail on what the Generation 3 platform is going to be. I don't know how much detail they're going to give us. I think they've been clear in advance that the goals are low cost per mile of operation rather than high performance, or and then low cost of manufacturing. So I actually think that Investor Day will be more about the factory that will produce the Generation 3 vehicle. It will be equally about the factory that's going to produce the Generation 3 vehicle as it is about the Generation 3 vehicle itself. There's a duality to the engineering. You're engineering a vehicle to be optimal for the task, but you're also engineering a vehicle to be optimal for manufacturing, and then you're engineering a factory to be optimal for manufacturing that vehicle. It is not the way people typically think about manufacturing. They typically think, what do I want to make? What do the consumers want to buy? Okay, let's figure out what we want to make, and then we'll figure out how to manufacture it later. And Tesla has a duality. They're engineering both at the same time.
Do you think we will see the shape of the actual upper part of the car?
That would be something I would expect them to do. I don't know how faithful it'll be to what the car is going to be. I don't worry about that. I actually think that the Generation 3 platform vehicle is the second most important thing that's going to happen on Investor Day. The most important thing that I'm hoping we learn on Investor Day is how are you going to get enough battery materials to make 3 terawatt hours of products in 2020 and 2030?
Which material?
We are not on a path. Humanity is not on a path to have sufficient battery materials available to produce, for Tesla alone, to use 3 terawatt hours of batteries in 2030. So Elon has talked about it. Drew Baglino has talked about it in the past. There is a plan to radically increase the availability of battery materials. And I think that's the important thing that's going to be covered on Investor Day. And Wall Street won't care, but I do.
So which materials are you most concerned about?
Lithium, nickel, oddly graphite, which I wouldn't think would be that much of a challenge, but Drew Baglino mentioned that it's a challenge. Manganese, maybe. I don't think cobalt's an issue because I think they're going away from cobalt.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably something like rare earths. I'm not sure if that's a challenge or not. I mean, I think nickel and lithium is number 1 and nickel is number 2. And then after that, I'm not sure. But I know Drew Baglino specifically mentioned graphite in his talk at Stanford, that the existing way, it's not even necessarily that, can we get enough of it? It's, can we change the way we get this stuff so that it's not only available in higher volume, but it's available at lower cost?
And the replacements for lithium and nickel would be sodium and lead.
No. I think the current plan is to massively increase the amount of lithium and massively increase the amount of nickel, not replace them. I know Drew talked about sodium at one point, but he talked about it as an academic problem, not an engineering problem at this point. I don't think that sodium is ready for prime time for vehicle or grid storage use.
Okay.
I'm not saying I know. Just my gut is that I think the cycle life of sodium-based batteries is not sufficient for the use case, or otherwise does not perform well enough for the use case they have in mind.
I see. Okay.
I'm not saying I'm not a chemistry expert. I'm not a battery chemistry expert. It's my best read. If you watch Drew's talk at Stanford, he specifically mentioned sodium. And it sounded to me like he was describing as a problem that academic research should work on to get to the point where they can actually use sodium. My interpretation, not what he said.
Right.
My interpretation is that sodium is not ready for manufacturing use yet.
So CATL,
not at scale.
So CATL is supposed to be producing sodium this year. That's my understanding, is that they've actually announced, and there's pricing and orders being placed for sodium even as we speak.
I've seen something about that. I don't know what scale they're making it at. I don't know what the cycle life of their batteries are. I don't know what the performance characteristics of their batteries are yet. I suspect that they're not as good as lithium iron phosphate.
I think
they're not as good as what's that?
I suspect that you're right on that. I think they're probably not as good at some level,
okay.
But they might.
So here's the problem: lithium iron phosphate is barely good enough for cars. It's barely good enough for cars. It's very good for energy storage. But it's barely good enough for cars. So if sodium-based batteries are not as good as lithium iron phosphate, then they're not good enough for cars.
Yeah, well, so if lithium nickel goes to the top and lithium iron goes to the next level, and maybe it's sodium iron for storage or something like that. I mean, I'm trying to look at the massive number of chemical combination possibilities. I talked to I talked to Jordan about this, and he goes, "There's so many combinations of chemistries possible that it's almost exponential. Not exponential. It's almost infinite the number of ways you can combine chemistry."
Yeah, I'm not claiming I have like a lot of knowledge. This is like an opinion that I'm ready to be moved from. I think my gut hunch is there's something about sodium-based batteries that makes them not good enough that Tesla's not going to go with that. It may be that they're going to surprise us on Investor Day and say, we've reached a deal with CATL to use their sodium-based chemistry to produce, energy storage batteries in high volume. But I haven't seen any hint of Tesla saying anything about using sodium anywhere other than Drew saying it's a nice academic research project. They've been very clear about lithium iron phosphate. Elon has mentioned doping lithium iron phosphate with manganese. I have never heard them talk about sodium being anywhere near ready for prime time for what Tesla does.
So completely changing subjects. I know you don't care about politics. You have zero interest in things political.
Sure.
But
you want this video to be censored, is what you're telling me.
No. I'm not going to go that direction. I want to go the direction. Remember, I'm a marketing guy. So I'm not sure that the issue hasn't almost gone away, because I think it's off the headlines now. But what do you think the effect of Elon's political conversations, his political tweets, his decision to take over Twitter, et cetera, that is having on the folks on the left? And do you think that any of them are failing to purchase the stock or purchase the car because they would be virtues? They would be, what's the opposite of virtue signaling? They would be not virtue. Anyway, do you think there's enough individuals that are affected by this that it would have any effect on the stock or the car sales?
So in terms of people's stock purchasing decisions in the short term, I don't claim to understand that well enough to have an opinion. I think that there's certainly been a lot of noise created by people in the Tesla Twitter community who have asserted that it has an impact on the stock, that alone might have had an impact on the stock, but I think that impact is trivial. For the long term, I think it had zero effect on the company. And the thing that matters is that it have an effect on the company, not that it have an effect on the stock in the short term.
Right.
Because I don't care about the stock in the short term. I want the stock to go down because I'm selling my house, and when my house sells, I get a pile of cash, and I can buy more Tesla stock. If we could get the stock price down to $50 a share right now, I'd really appreciate it. Not right now, like when my house sells. If we could get it down to 50 right at that moment, that would be great. Because then I can buy twice as much or 4 times as much stock as I can buy right now. But what matters is the long-term future of the company, and Elon's political tweets have nothing to do with the long-term future of the company. Zero.
Well, there's
not a measure. It has such a small impact as to not be measurable.
So my argument was that it was possible that all the liberals have already bought their Teslas on the coasts, and that the move to the right could have been strategic.
No, it's nothing to do with that. Elon's just shooting his mouth off about stuff he's not happy about, and that's it. And he's not trying to manipulate the market for Tesla vehicles by talking about politics.
I agree with you.
To me, that demonstrates a lack of I don't think that's the way Elon thinks.
I don't think so.
And I will tell you that I have friends who are Republicans who text me all the time, and they have not stopped making fun of Tesla the entire time.
They still do. Yeah, they haven't figured it out. They
still make fun of Tesla. They made fun of Tesla before. They make fun of Tesla now. They constantly send me articles. Oh, a Tesla Model S battery went on fire spontaneously.
Yeah.
Why did the front of the car look dented? I'm going to say the front of the car looked dented, that the fire in the battery didn't cause the front of the car to get dented. The car probably crashed.
Yes.
Just saying that spontaneous is an interesting choice of words. So they're constantly teasing me about Tesla, and I can promise you, when the Tesla went over the cliff in California and fell off the cliff, and the rescue team was expecting to pull out dead bodies, and they pulled out 4 people who were not seriously hurt, I made sure to send them that story at least once.
I'm sure of that.
But I don't think that Elon was trying to game to get Republicans to buy Teslas. The reality is that people buy cars because they like the cars. And if they think the cars are great cars and their friends tell them they're great cars, and at a certain point they say, hey, I want to try this out. And then they're like, wow, this is a really good car. And then they buy the car. And they don't care whether the CEO said whatever. I live in Florida, and our major supermarket chain is called Publix. And the head of the family that owns Publix is consistently supporting, financially supporting campaigns to stop marijuana from being legalized in any form. Mm-hmm. And liberals complain about it, and they still shop at Publix. You know why? Because it's a better store. Right. It's a great grocery store. I personally think marijuana should be legal. It doesn't stop me from shopping at the grocery store. You know why? Because it's a good grocery store. The staff are friendly. They're helpful. They have reasonable prices. They have good selection of products. I don't care if I disagree with the head of Publix about marijuana legalization.
Yeah. To be clear to my audience, I don't think Elon made a strategic decision either. It was kind of one of those throwaway questions. So my big last question that I've asked all my other interview folks, everybody else that I brought on the channel, you live a very comfortable life. You're at the
pretty comfortable
10-minute walk from the beach in Florida year round. You're in shorts today in the middle of winter. Things are pretty good. You can pretty much travel anywhere you want. You can pretty much, drive an X. I mean, things are pretty good, Warren. If everything that Elon has...
Just to be clear, when I walk to the gym in the morning, I took my shirt off.
There you go.
Because I'm trying to smooth out my tan lines.
So, a lot of folks are doing as well as you, Warren. And a lot of people are doing not as well, but they're still doing extremely well, especially in Western countries. If we do have this massive increase in wealth, if everything that Elon's working on turns out to be true, and we get all of these additional increases in the economy, as well as the decreases in the cost of living, will it change any of our lives significantly? Will it change your life? What are you hoping that will be better in your life as a result of all this?
Well, for me personally, I own a lot of Tesla stock. And if Tesla stock 10Xs or 20Xs, then I would say things like my travel choices become a lot more pleasant. Like currently when I fly, I try to get the cheapest flight I can, and I'll probably break that behavior at some point. Like I'm flying up to New York City this week, round trip under $100, flying on cheap airlines. Like at a certain point, I'm going to say, I'm going to fly JSX, this business class airline that exists that has Starlink built in, and it would be $800 instead of $100. I might choose to stay in hotels instead of sleeping in my car. I don't really like sleeping in hotels anyway, so I kind of like sleeping in my car. But so I think that there are certain choices that I would probably make differently. But honestly, I like living lean. I don't like living, I try to eat, and I cook for myself because it's healthier, and so yeah, I don't know. I'm like, for me personally, it's more that I will have more confidence that my kids will have more resources. And like my plan for the money that the wealth that I'm generating through Tesla stock is to start up my own companies. That my goal I'm not driven by like making my personal life better, like on a financial, what I spend money on or whatever. I do think buying the Plaid X was probably not the best financial decision in the world. Looking at it now. But I think it's not going to stop me from buying Cybertruck. So, I think that my focus is not how does this make life better for Warren or Randy, but how can these changes make life better for the rest of humanity? What about people who live on $50,000 a year, who don't have accumulated wealth, who are paying rent? What about people in India who are living on $2,500 a year? What about people in Egypt who are living, there's a lot of people in this world who are struggling much worse than any American. And I think that in the long run, in the next 10 to 20 years, a lot of these technological changes from Tesla, from others, not just from Tesla, are going to make life better for billions of people. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's where we're going to see the real benefit is a tremendous increase in the wealth of the least. The least.
Let me give you a simple example.
Sure.
Sure, the Dominican Republic has the highest traffic fatality rate in the world. So one of my thoughts about Robotaxi is there's countries in the world that have much higher traffic fatality rates than we have here in America. And if Robotaxi becomes pervasive throughout the world, then it's going to save a lot of lives. I know, like, I think there's 1 million people who die on traffic accidents a year worldwide. So it's like 40,000 in the US, but 1 million worldwide. So what if the number of traffic deaths is reduced from 1 million to 10,000?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how amazing would that be?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just one of so many different ways that, what if electric vehicles in India lead to much cleaner air to breathe in India and there are poor countries that have poor air quality because because they don't have clean energy the way we do. Even our natural gas is cleaner energy than what they have, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what if we're able to end up making life that much better for people in all these countries, and make life better for poorer Americans as well?
Right.
I think there's a lot of ways that a lot of this technological change is going to make life. I mean, smartphones have already permeated the world, mm-hmm. right? And there's fishermen off the coast of Africa who got some fish, and they're deciding what fish market to go to based on what they're hearing from their cell phone that they didn't used to have a phone before. So there's so many different ways that technology improves the lives of people. And early in the early days of any technology, people complain that the rich people have it and the poor people don't. But you need to have that technology go through the rich people first, who can afford to spend money excessively on something silly, to radically improve the technology and improve the manufacturing of it, to get to the point where that can become a mass market thing and it can help, middle class people and then poor people.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I have a 65-inch TV in my place that costs, I think, $400. Like, it used to be that if you had a 32-inch TV, it cost, $1,000.
Right.
Right. And it was big and heavy and bulky and awkward, big CRT or whatever. So the fact that early on rich people bought LCD TVs and paid $5,000 for them is what made it possible for the companies to eventually sell them to poor people for $400.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah. I think that is the big leap. And, but it is fun to kind of think about the fact. I think where it started for me was watching old movies from the 30s and 40s, and the way they were depicted, they weren't living such a hard life. With all the technological advantage we have today, it wasn't such a hard life. And so
I think you're a little older than me.
I am.
I'm 56, and I remember when we had one phone in the house on a wall, or maybe it was on a counter. I think it was on a counter, and it was a rotary dial phone.
Right.
And I remember talking to my mother about when she was a kid, they had one phone in the building for, 20 apartments.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And of course, before her, there was no phones.
Right.
And look, I was a kid, and we didn't have iPad, we had Etch-a-Sketch, and life was good.
Yes.
I think people don't appreciate how much technology has made our lives better. And to some extent, people don't appreciate how good we have it. Like, I think I'm a person, you mentioned, I live comfortably. It's like, I was happy living in a 200 square foot apartment in Hiroshima, Japan, not owning a car, riding public transportation, living on, I don't know, $30,000 a year. And I was sending $1,000 a month home. I was happy with that. I think some people need to stay in 4-star hotels, and they need to go out to fancy dinners all the time. And they develop the perception that life isn't fulfilling unless you have that. And I literally take a can of tuna fish and some hummus and some onion, and I make myself lunch, and I'm happy. Or I throw some vegetables. I threw some vegetables in a pan today. I used bacon, not completely plant-based, but a big chunk of vegetables and a few strips of bacon. And I made myself lunch today, and I thought it was great. And it probably cost me, I don't know, $2.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So I think one of the challenges in society may be for people to recognize, where can I spend less money and still, like, what am I spending money on that doesn't really add that much value to my life?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And maybe instead of spend, like go out with friends, and this one guy, he'll spend like $200, he'll spend like $200 at dinner because he's buying all these drinks and he's buying a couple extra things or whatever. And I'm like, I get us an appetizer and a bottle of Pellegrino, and I spend like $20, and he's spending like $200. Like, he makes probably 5 times as much money as I do, and he has less wealth because he's just spending all his money.
Right.
And I would argue that that's probably not the best choice for himself. He's happy. I think he's happy. But I think, there's a challenge for everyone in life, is to figure out, how do you live a life that is fulfilling and makes you feel happy, and you're enjoying yourself, and you're not harming others, and you're helping people, if ideally. How do you find that path in life? And it's not usually through spending money recklessly.
Usually not. And I don't know how we could possibly end the interview on a better phrase than that one. So I really appreciate you coming on board today, Warren, and love to have you on any time. And to those of you who are listening, you know what to do. If you liked having Warren on, subscribe, join my Patreon group, and we'll look forward to having great guests in the future. Thank you again, Warren.
Yeah, and please check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com and
Perfect.
check out my channels.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Randy.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.